Good evening to everybody. Happy to see you all here. We've been doing this on Wednesday nights since 1989, over 30 years. Back then, when I first became conscious of Aaron and began to channel him, it's important that you recognize that while I feel like I am channeling him, that there's a different entity, different consciousness than me here. That you don't have to believe in anything. Listen to the words. And if what's being said is of value to you, use it. If not, release it. That's the only thing you really need to know. That said, I'm going to move aside. People sometimes ask me, where do you go when Aaron's in the body? It's very peaceful. I have no idea where I am. I don't really see anything that much visually, just light and color and space, and I'm resting at ease in a very spacious realm with very high energy. And Aaron is in my body. So, that being said, I'm going to invite Aaron to come in. My blessings and love to you all. I am Aaron. Such a joy to be with you. I greet you in love. And thank you for joining us tonight. What are, quote, troubled times? This is a large planet, always somewhere on your earth. There is physical violence, always somewhere on your earth. There is an unstable planet, earthquakes, landslides, floods. Always somewhere on your earth, there is illness. Throughout history, this has come and lessened, and come and lessened. And all of you have lived through these times when there seemed to be more turbulence than normal. Barbara has a hot tub that she enjoys very much. Has had one for probably close to 30 years. At times when it's filled, the water is very near the top. When you climb in, it brings it up even closer to the top. If the water sloshes over, it can fall onto the motor components. So it's important not to let the water wet these electronic elements. When Barbara's alone in the tub, she just sits there. But when there are family, 3 or 4 people in it, the children playing, the water will start to slosh. Barbara would say to the children, don't stir up the water. The children would then look around at the water splashing over the edge and put their hands on it, as if with their hands they could quiet the water. But the more movement there is to try to quiet things, the more you agitate. Most of you are looking at the state of your world these days, at the politics, the pandemic, the environmental issues. And when you look at any of these areas, agitation arises. It is normal to feel agitated when something is disturbing. You are here in a physical body. There is an emotional and a mental body. All of these are real. This is part of your human aspect. It's not a problem at all that these exist. We're grateful that they exist. Otherwise, how would you learn in this incarnation? You come with these bodies in order to learn and to teach. You also have the power not to give control to these bodies. If agitation arises, know that it has arisen from conditions and it is impermanent. It will pass. If worry arises, know that it has arisen from conditions and is impermanent. It will pass. When fear, grief, anger, or sadness arise, they arise from conditions. They are impermanent. They will pass. All of these arisings of your mundane world are your teachers. They are never problems. They may be something that creates unwholesome conditions. We certainly do not wish the coronavirus on anybody. It's more than an unpleasant condition, it can kill. But then again, all of you have lived and died countless times. There are worse things than to die. And if you do not die, you cannot be born. Sometimes people need to come into a new situation to see the world in a new way. So we cannot even say that death must be avoided at all costs, because you can't avoid it. You are here to learn compassion. Yes, wisdom also, but predominantly compassion. You are here to stretch the boundaries of your heart, to find out how deeply you can love and how much that love can change the world. Right now, your country is in a challenging place. There is great divisiveness. I'm sure some of you saw the impeachment debate today. With very few exceptions, These men and women simply talked at each other. But I doubt if anybody listened to what somebody who opposed them was saying. I'm sure each of you have your own thoughts about how it should be. But unless you all learn to listen to each other, change is impossible. You are simply running through the same patterns over and over. The question then is, what allows you to listen? To listen to those who have different political views than you. To listen to the coronavirus and what it is trying to say. To listen to the environment weeping and asking your help to survive, to flourish. You are here in the incarnation with a purpose. And that purpose is to broaden in love, in that vibration that we call love, to bring it into the earth plane, to anchor it in the earth plane. And through the high vibration of love, to begin to shift this whole planet into a higher vibration, higher density. When something comes along, like last Wednesday's, you don't know what to call it, demonstration of fear and hatred at the Capitol. And you add hatred to it. Hatred will never heal hatred. The Buddha said this 2,500 years ago. Beautiful laws. Hatred never resolved hatred. Only love resolves hatred. This is the truth, ancient and immutable. So much of your earth plane experience then is learning how to bring love, that beautiful vibration that we call love, to places where there is turbulence. How not to try to slap your hands on top of the turbulence to prevent it from spilling over, but to hold space for it, a bigger container. As if Barbara could have practiced this by suddenly increasing the dimensions of her hot tub so the water that was pouring over the top was given more space. You're all increasing the space within your hot tubs so that the water will not slosh out. And then you can lie down on your back and float there in the warm water, look up at the sky, at the stars, and just say thank you. Then, if you push the button that makes the jets go, the water starts to froth. Ah, what does it feel like in your world when the water is spinning around, jets going every direction? In the hot tub, you love it. In your daily life, you want it to stop. What feels so good about it in the hot tub? Movement, energy of the water, massaging, stimulating. How would it be on Earth if there was never a new thought? If everybody saw things with exactly the same viewpoint? If the temperature remained at 70 degrees constant, and there was only rain from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., and that a warm, gentle rain. The sky was always blue in the daytime. Never a cloud. How long would it take before you thought to yourself, I'd love to see a good storm? Earth is like that. It gives you a lot of good storms. And if you have a sturdy boat, you can ride out those storms with no problem. And if your boat is not so sturdy, it may tip over. You'll find yourself in the sea. Your companions hopefully will spot you there, throw you a life alarm, bring you back up on board. And next time you'll be a bit more careful to be sure your boat is not going to tip over. But following the same metaphor, how would it be if the sea was always calm, no wind? Your boat, you were permitted 5 minutes of use of a motor to motor a little ways out into the sea. And then you sit there all day. There's no wind, there's no current. And then when you're ready to go back to shore, 5 more minutes of motor to get you back to shore. How many people would enjoy going out in the boat day after day? You enjoy the waves and the wind. Why do you enjoy them? I think they add texture, interest to your life. They add challenge. It's a bit of a stretch to talk about enjoying what happened in the Capitol last week. But can you learn to hold something like that in your heart and say, interesting storm. I thought I saw the clouds gather. I suspected that there might be a storm. Interesting storm. I hold the intention that this storm not do any real damage. Here we work with the Akashic fields and other Akashic field singular and other co-creation practices. You know that turbulence last week. So much of what you are learning to do on Earth right now is to find a place that truly aspires to the highest good for yourself and all beings, and how to create and invite that. This is part of what we'll be learning in the workshop. It's a practice that's essential for those of you who have come to this incarnation to help bring the world through into a higher vibration, rather than create more harm and pain in the world. And I think that aspiration is true for all of you. You just have forgotten how to do it. You have forgotten the power of love that is your essence, and that you have the ability as divine beings to co-create from that power of love. And so you get out a stick and try to knock away everything that does not look like love. As those of you who watched the debate today saw, what looks like love to these people looks terrible to those people. So everybody is batting at everybody with sticks. Or more succinctly, everybody is batting at each other with pre-written speeches. This is how it is. This is how it is. No surprise that people cannot hear each other. You have a special commitment now in the world. I think the increased challenges right now are to remind you, come back to center, like our boat out at sea, just flat and still. But you want to learn balance, and you can't learn balance in a flat boat. So you invite and co-create a wind and a storm, a bigger storm than you imagined. Now your boat is pitching back and forth. If you move into terror and try to dash back and forth on the boat, you're probably going to tip. We'll come back to a centered place, envisioning the stable boat that nonetheless can race through the wind with the sails filled, flying over the waves, filled with energy and light. What joy! I see at least one sail around. I know you would not want to sit on a stagnant sea for weeks on end. Fill my sails, bring on wind and waves, bring on clouds and sunshine, and help me find balance through these teachers. So here we have the two parties at odds with each other. And the resident, perhaps at odds with most everybody else. Instead of saying no, can you say, okay, bring it on and let us practice love. Let us use this as an opportunity to shift the world with love. To do this, of course, you must first acknowledge that there is fear. Fear of what will happen, and even the personal fear. We will fail. I will fail. What prevents people from truly hearing each other? What if you truly could bring each person into your heart? If we were here live now, in one room together, I would send you off in pairs for 15 minutes to choose a topic, find a topic on which you had opposite views, and to see what allowed you to deeply listen to each other, and what prevented that deep listen. This is something you might try with a friend in the coming weeks. I think you know what prevents it. Fear. The one who is angry, the one who is afraid, the one who is determined to get it right. My friends, you have not come into the incarnation to fail. You have come because you felt ready to help bring this earth through this transition, truly into a higher density, into a realm of love. And then you cry out, no, no, when the wind blows up. Get used to the wind. It is not your enemy. Learn how to listen to your own fear so that you can listen to others. People tend to have a view of themselves and those who believe like they do, and a very different view of those who have a different belief. Belief is very powerful. If I believe that I am wrong, I tend to co-create from that belief. If I believe the opposition is wrong, I co-create from that belief. When you truly listen and feel listened to, it changes everything. So what does it take to truly listen? Acknowledgement of fear. Acknowledgement of discomfort. Barbara was talking in class recently. Barbara was a very strong swimmer, not as strong now that she's older, but still a good swimmer. But this is many years ago. She got into the ocean and almost immediately got into a riptide that started to pull her out to sea. Usually she would have seen it from shore. So it took her by surprise. And she did look for it, but the currents were deep and not so visible. The guideline with a rip current is to swim across it, to move out of it. But she could not move. It just was carrying her out. So she decided to simply relax and let it take her out. She knew she was capable of swimming even 2 or 3 miles if necessary when she got out of it. Once she relaxed, she simply let it carry her out. And as she guessed, eventually, perhaps half a mile out, it released her. Being carried out, there was a mix. Fear, looking back at the shore, it's taking me so far. And then the ocean and I are one. And I co-create my own safety here with the ocean. The ocean is not my enemy. Let it carry her out. As she felt the movement slow down, she just took a few minutes to lie on her back and float, looking at the sky, feeling the gentle swells around her, no longer a current. Then she thought to herself, thank you, ocean, for that ride. Now I know I can swim back into shore. I'm less than a mile out. But it will be tiring. I invite you to help me. I invite the change of the tide, something to bring me back to land. And she thought, not quite an afterthought, please bring me back to land near where I have left my towel and shoes. Not 2 miles down the shore. She thought then she should just begin to swim, but she decided, no, I'm going to rest on the waves for another 10 minutes. Not the waves, on the gentle swells. So she lay back and felt the swells, thanked the ocean around her for her safety, thanked it for that joyful ride, breathed, and was totally relaxed. Now, she would not have been relaxed if she was 2 miles out. Swimming back 2 miles would have been arduous for her. But half a mile, not afraid, just relaxed. Resting. And then about 15 minutes later, she got herself up so she could see the shore, and the tide had turned, and she was only 100 yards offshore, right where her shoes and towel were. The earth is not your enemy. Other beings are not your enemy. As one so wisely said some years ago, the only thing to fear is fear itself. And we don't really even need to fear fear, but simply to nod in respect to it and ask, right here with fear, where is that which is not afraid? I choose. I am powerful. I am love. And I choose from the perspective of love. Choose a country that is not at war with itself, but where beings truly care about what is for the highest good of each. Choose to co-create an environment that suits every sentient being at every level and harm to none. Choose love. Choose not to fear your power, but learn how to channel that back for the highest good. This is what you came for. And you all have this capacity. Many of you are concerned, listening to the news, what may happen this weekend when so many plans seem to be in the works for destruction. What may happen the day of the inauguration with similar plans. It's just a wave. Let it go by. If enough of you around this country truly choose from your hearts, not from a place of fear, but with love, to invite the highest good and harm to none, to invite those who feel unheard, to feel heard without need for violence, to invite this energy of compassion and loving kindness to sweep your whole earth, and especially in the coming week, this country. This is not a guarantee there will be no violence. But instead of playing into the hands of violence, fighting with the wind and the waves until you tip your boat, you practice balancing the boat, appreciating the power of the wind and waves, and joining forces with them to steer your boat back to shore. Let it be fun, not terrifying. Start to know what you are truly capable of. You can do it. I told Barbara that I would like to tell a story tonight, and began to ponder what story I might tell. And it occurred to me that the best story for this has already been told. How many of you are familiar with my Halloween story of 25 years ago? How many are not familiar with it? With permission of those who know it, hopefully you'll enjoy hearing it again. I would like to simply read it. It will take me about 10-15 minutes. Janice, I'm going to turn off the recorder. Obviously, you do not need to transcribe this. I'm just going to read it from the presentation and presence, kindness, and freedom. Relax and enjoy. This was told on October 30th, 1996. Good evening and my love to you. I am Aaron. Since I am officially a ghost, I feel qualified to tell ghost stories. I want to tell you of the experience of a long and distant lifetime. Just making the font a bit bigger. Of a long distant lifetime. I'm going to tell the story in the first person. When I say I, you recognize that this is not me, Aaron, but a past incarnation. One small aspect of myself. The being that I was a priest, a Christian monastic. I spent much time walking from village to village, seeking shelter at night in whatever farm or village home was available. Sometimes I slept in hovels. Sometimes I slept, I am marking a typo in the text. Sometimes I slept in hovels or even in the field. At other times in what would seem to be a castle or other grand stately building. It was late fall, the time of your Halloween. Well, Halloween is a secular holiday in your culture, in which children dress in fancy costumes and seek candy. It has much deeper spiritual roots. This is a time of year when more earthbound spirits seem to be abroad. Perhaps it has to do with the changes of the moon and the season. For whatever reason, that which in many cultures is known as Day of the Dead is a day in which many earthbound spirits do come out. I've often wondered why in your culture you allow little children to run around on such a night. I suppose in good storytelling form, I should say it was a dark and stormy night. But actually, it was a rather fair evening for that time of year. But it was growing dark, and I had passed through fields and woods and not seen a dwelling. Some miles back, I had gone through a village, and they had told me I would come to a rather large manor house. That the house had been deserted for some time, but was recently inhabited by an elderly man. He had repaired it. They supposed I could find shelter there. Just as dusk approached, I saw the lights of this very grand house in the distance, much larger than I expected. I knocked on the door, seeking really only some bedding in a barn, a place in the straw with the animals. But the servant who opened the door said, "Yes, come in. My master will be happy to have you as his guest." The master was very gracious to me, gave me food and water, then led me up a long circular stairway to what seemed to be a room in a high tower. I carried a candle, and he also carried a candle. When we came into the room, there were several unlit candles there, and he lit them. So the room had a warm and comfortable glow. He nodded, asked if my needs were met, and I said yes. He said good night and closed the door behind him. He told me that this was the first room of a suite, and I could see there were doors off it. He said I would find a bed in the next room to make myself comfortable. When the door closed behind him and clicked, I heard what sounded like a key in the lock. At first, it alarmed me, and I immediately went and tested the door. I heard his voice on the other side saying, "I will open it in the morning. It doesn't lock from your side. I have the key, and it is for your protection." It seemed a bit strange to me, but I resigned myself and would not argue with him. Exhausted as I was from the day's walk, I washed at the basin that had been left for me, and then opened the door into what I presumed was the bedroom, holding my candle. The scene in that room still rings in my memory with horror. In that room were no fewer than 4 dead bodies in different stages of decay. One was merely a skeleton, the remains of ragged clothes hanging about it. Another 2 had shreds of flesh left, and the 4th looked like a body of one who had just died in that fortnight. I went back out to the first room, and as I looked closely at my surroundings, I could see attempts on the door to pick the lock or pry open at the hinges. And I realized that this, I can only call him a sick man, took some strange delight in imprisoning his victims and condemning them to death in that way. I knew he would not open the door in the morning. My first reaction was rage and fear. I looked at the window, but it was far too high to descend, even if there had been anything to climb down upon. I went to the door and pounded on it. His laughter on the other side told me he had not walked away, but was waiting for just that reaction from me. That it fed him, that he drew his energy off of my fear. I determined not to give him that gift of my fear. So I sat and began to pray. Through the early hours of the night, I simply sat and meditated with my fear of death, with my outrage, with my dread of this fate, until my mind quieted enough that I began to find some compassion for him, who was so clearly sick. He did not believe in evil. I did not believe in evil then any more than I believe in it now. But if, as you have heard me say, there are those who offer very great distortion and do very great harm in their negativity. I began to reflect on how immense his pain must be, that he needed to do this to another. Slowly, my anger quieted, and I found forgiveness for him and for myself for that which was also negative in myself. Then, in a deeper meditation, I asked, is there a way out, or must I die? I began to have a vision, a stone shaped like a keystone. It came to me so strongly that after an hour of meditation on that stone, I got up and searched that front room. There was one wall, the outer wall, that was rock, but there was no stone of that shape. And if there had been, if I had opened it, it simply would have opened to an immense precipice. I cannot tell you how much I did not want to walk into that bedroom with the corpses. I had been sitting in the front room with all 3 candles lit, and I realized they were burning down and I would be left in darkness. So I blew 2 of them out, leaving myself just 1. Gathering my courage, I walked back into the bedroom and searched and searched. No keystone-shaped stone. I went back to the living room and sat, but the stone stayed so firmly in my mind. And a small voice said, behind, behind. Behind meant back to the bedroom. There was one nook with a drapery across. I confess I had not looked there, actually certain that I would find more corpses. Instead, I found that it was somewhat of a closet with a few articles of clothing. And on the back wall was the keystone. My heart stopped. This was a stone wall, and yet it was an inner wall. I looked for a door there, some mechanism, but there was none. Finally, by the flickering of the candle, I touched that stone, pressed my hand against it. There was an almost silent hum and a bit of creaking, and the wall literally opened itself. The doorway was so perfectly hidden that even one who knew it existed would have trouble finding it. It was not square, but followed the outline of the stones. I pushed it closed and saw the outline of it disappear into the mortar of the stones. Pushed the keystone again and opened just a crack. Enough for me to take my fingers and pull it back a bit. And there beyond was a staircase. Very dark, very steep. While my candle was dim, the moon was full outside, and there were some windows. So I had not been in total darkness. Now ahead of me in the staircase was only blackness. I would like to be able to say to you that I trusted God, trusted Jesus, took Jesus' hand as the priest that I was, and descended the stairs. But there was very little faith or trust in my movement. Rather, there was a sense of dread in this room surrounded by corpses, of which I was soon to become one if I stayed. That blackness seemed the only hope, so I stepped into it. I went down and down, tiptoeing on stocking feet, lest the noise betray me. I went down what seemed much further than the ground level. As I descended, I began to hear running water. I will not describe in detail to you the cobwebs and the sound of rats and the feeling of them as they rushed past me. I reached the bottom step, and in the flickering of light from my candle, I saw a rushing stream about 5 feet below me. And then my candle went out. It was clear to me there was no other way out. It was clear from his maniacal laughter and the corpses of the guests before me that he did not intend merely to frighten me and let me loose at no one, but took delight in my fear and suffering. And furthermore, I had been born on a seacoast, the son of a fisherman, and I was a very good swimmer. I decided that the water must be going somewhere, and to trust myself into it rather than returning up the stairs to the corpses. The fear within that room and the likelihood of death. And so I dived in. The current was not as fierce as I thought it would be. In fact, it was rather mild. I decided to swim with the current, face on the surface for a short ways, holding my hands ahead of me. This went fine until I felt a wall ahead of me, where the stream went below ground. I realized I must dive underwater and pray that I would come up soon. Treading water there in the darkness, a wall in front of me, an opening into which the water ran 4 or 5 feet down. Suddenly I felt very comforted. I realized that I wanted to escape, but I did not heed the one who imprisoned me. I realized in that moment that if I escaped, I would not come back to seek revenge on him, but would in some way hope to help him heal and bring him into the light. So that became my intention just before I dove in, not for revenge. Not for revenge, but for the good of all beings. May I survive this. And then I dove. I swam until my lungs would burst, filling the rocky roof of my submerged passage, until suddenly it opened out. There I was in the river, under the night sky, I was out, and I suppose you might think that this was the end of the story. It was still only the middle of the night. I sat on a rock just at the opening of this underground stream, the castle looming above me, and offered thanks for my deliverance. Then I thought of this man, lord of his castle, and diminished to a sorrowful state by his fear and confusion. I asked myself and asked God, is there any way this man can be saved from his negativity? Is there any way that I can help him come into the light? Remember, I offered the story 25 years ago. Today, I would phrase it a little differently. Is there any way that I can help this man release himself from his negativity? The first images that crossed my mind were to find some fellow monks or villagers and bring them back and come into the castle, come to that room and accuse him. But I knew that would only drive him further into darkness. And while he might suffer, might be imprisoned, his heart would not open. Then I had a wonderful and terrible idea. So terrible did it seem, in fact, that at first I could not bring myself to doubt, but finally it seemed the idea was truly of divine origin, and that if I attempted it with love, I would succeed. I dove into the water, filled my lungs with air as full as I could, for this time I should have to swim upstream. I dove into the tunnel, grabbing at the rock walls to pull myself along until I finally emerged at the other end of the foot of that stairway. I climbed the stairs in the blackness and emerged in that room. I knew that he could not know about the secret doorway, nor of course had any of those who died. I took each corpse, carrying it carefully, respectfully, and so as to be noiseless on those stairs. I carried each down to the bottom and into the water. Then I went back and cleaned up that room as best I could, made it look really inviting and comfortable, and finally stepped into the stairway again. This time I pulled the wall closed behind me until it clicked and went down the stairs into the water, past which the bodies lay on a simple ledge by the river. I dove underneath the barrier and came out once again, free in the night. The next day I had breakfast and begged dry clothes, hung my monk's robe out to dry in the sun and breeze. Then, when the sun was fully up, I came back and knocked on the door. If the servant was surprised to see me, he gave no sign. I do not believe he had any idea of what his master was about, but supposed that those who had been guests had gone on the next day. I said that his master had unlocked the door early, as I had requested, but I wanted to come back and thank him. Was he there? The servant brought me in to where the master breakfasted. He looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. Never have I seen a man so surprised, so alarmed. "What are you doing here?" he stuttered. "Well, I came to thank you. I had a most comfortable night." "You what?" "Ah, yes, I was so tired. And it was a comfortable room. And then this morning, when you unlocked the door so graciously at that hour that I asked, I was afraid I had not thanked you properly. So I have come back to thank you." Again, he said it was a comfortable room. Oh, yes, a wonderful bed. And I invited him to come back up with me. I asked him, have you ever lain on that bed? He didn't want to come. His confusion finally drew him along, as did his curiosity. And so we went upstairs, through that living room and into the now comfortable and cleaned bedroom. No corpses to be seen. I said, lie down on it. It's a wonderful bed. I had such a good night here. What a good man you are. You must be blessed by God to offer such hospitality. May God continue to bless you for your hospitality and your love of others. But I am a bad man. He blinked and shook his head as if his whole murderous assault on so many was but a nightmare. No, you are a good man, a kind man. By what evil vision do you believe yourself to be bad? You are generous and kind. He said, yes, thank you. We have breakfast with me, and we did dine together. I asked him if I might come back and perhaps bring a fellow monk with me. I thought I'd be walking back that way later in the month. When I returned, I made sure to choose a fellow monk who was also a good swimmer, just in case. We were again treated to dinner and shown to this room that we might share this large bed. No corpses this time. Once again, he left him with a candle and closed the door. I asked him, aren't you going to lock it so I'll be safe? He said, no, I don't think I need to do that. And then I heard his footsteps descend the stairs. I will confess I did not go to sleep that night. I was not sure he would not come back and attack me sometime during the night. I did not know how complete his conversion had been, or whether he was shamming. I did not, but when we arose in the morning, he invited us to come, and we sat with him at breakfast. He told me then that he felt like one awakening from a nightmare, and asked me to send other monks and guests his way, that he would always welcome them. I suppose a moral might be offered, but I think that should spoil a good story. So I will choose to leave it where it is and leave you to your own thinking about it. I can only say that to the best of my ability to relate this story as absolute truth as I experienced it, I have done so. As with the first telling, I will not end with a moral. Simply ask you, audience participation time. What relevance does this story have to what we saw last Wednesday, to this debate today with two sides talking at each other? With the fear with which most humans live their lives, and your intention to bring love into this lifetime, to co-create for the highest good, a world of peace, compassion, and love. So open here to discussion. You're sharing your thoughts and also to any questions. Although I'm not sure I have any answers beyond what I have already shared. I understand your question. From a deeply, quote, moral viewpoint, I do not lie. Really, the only lie I told him was that I had a sound night's sleep. what good would have been gained by my self-righteousness saying, I will not lie, I will not deceive another in any way, and in pulling him down, destroying him. Sometimes we have to trust ourselves. I'm not saying that it is right to lie, or really that there's ever an excuse to lie. But if my intention, if my highest intention is not never to lie, but never to do harm, then I have to ask myself, what will do harm and what will not do harm? Am I willing to trust myself? Now, this is not something I would offer to most people who may be not ready to trust themselves. So you've picked up on something, a fine point here that's important. Basically, I would say to most of you, it's better not ever to lie. But if you see that lying will create more harm, I mean, that telling the truth will create more harm, and that lying, phrasing it differently, may create a higher good. Are you willing to risk it? Still being willing to say, I ask your forgiveness. I did not tell the truth, if it turns out to be that way. I didn't really lie to him. This is maybe a fine point. But the only lie was that I had a good night's sleep. I did have a good night. It was a very enlightening kind of night, moving past my own fear, finding the power to turn a hard situation into something good. You may not agree with that, and that's okay. This is really why I choose to tell this story, because it's so easy to create polarity. The good guys and the bad guys. And most of you have Mr. Trump aligned as the bad guy. And those who did not vote to impeach him today as the bad guy, and those who stormed the Capitol as the bad guys. But compassion does teach us there is no good guy or bad guy, only people who are caught in various dilemmas based on their karma and personality. When we can truly seek that which is beautiful in each person and can listen to their viewpoint, hearing it from somebody who has their own innate beauty, hearing something different from the way you understand it, but truly hearing. Then it ceases to be me against them and us together trying to resolve this dilemma. Ceasing to see the other as the demon really is the beginning of hearing and understanding. Now, I would add here, if the other continues to spew heat, there's a certain point where you have to say, no, I choose not to listen to this anymore. But first, you do need to listen. And as you listen, you invite that which is beautiful in that person to come forth, instead of that which is afraid and angry. Here is, I don't see them as evil, just unfortunately conditioned. I would say that's appropriate. What is evil? I do not see anything as an ultimate evil, only light and relative absence of light. the old energies, or the energies of duality and fear that were not part of the creation of Earth, but came to the Earth after that creation. They were not, let me say it this way, negativity was not in the original plan for Earth, only relative absence of light. Let me say that a bit more clearly. Some kind of complete darkness and negativity was not in the plan for Earth. Only enough relative absence of light to invite those sentient beings to see the absence of light and say no to it, to release it, and find right there with that absence of light where the light was. It's taken you many, 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 many thousands of years. It is done. And I think you're all beginning to see the new possibilities. To the story and also to your current situation today. One of the people to whom we are referring seems to be in a mental state in which the idea of losing is so horrifying to him that he must make up stories about it, must lie about it. If you tell him you lost, it makes it worse. And yet you cannot tell him you won. So what do you tell him? We have this man who has great power right now. What do you tell him? But what do you tell those who can hear the truth also? The ones who are supporting him are not in that mental situation where they cannot hear the truth. They're just caught in fear. Sometimes you must put it as it is. No, you did not win, but it's okay that you did not win. You might temper it to say people still love you. They will be proud of you. They will be so proud of you when you can acknowledge that you did not win. How can you put it to him to help him get past this fear of losing? But when somebody has some mental imbalance, I want to speak carefully here. I'm not in a situation to judge any person, but seems incapable of understanding the truth, of living with the truth. What about the people who need his approval? To them, you cannot lie. To them, it's important to call up the truth and say, you're afraid. So much of the country, let's say 48% of the country voted for this man, and you wanted the approval of those who voted for him. You want your own political future. But then to call upon that which is beautiful and clear in that person. You are a congressman because you love this country. It's different to believe in the policies that this president has promoted and to believe that the election was fraudulent. It's been proved the election was not fraudulent. And yet there is still, one can acknowledge that and say still, I believe in the policies And this is what I want my party to represent. Okay, I hear you. I disagree with you. Here we can communicate as two people, each hearing the other's views and trying to find a place where we can come together. So looking at the extremity, going along with it out of fear, there we do not lie. There we have to call it as we see it. And of course, they may say, you're lying. At what point does one hold to one's principles, to the way one understands, while knowing I cannot promise I'm 100% right, only this is my view. But because this view was thusly supported by many courts and investigations, it seems like it's a clear view. I don't promise it to be 100% truth, but it seems like a clear view. So we need to understand where the problem is. The people who are afraid of it being in their president's disfavor, in their public's disfavor. This is fear and can be moved past. And the people who are caught up, or the one who was caught up in a myth created by a mind that has some illness. It's the only way I can phrase it. I hesitate to get into politics here. I'm aware in this group probably people agree with me, but there may be some of you who don't agree with it. And I'm not about to get into a political discussion with you. My issue here tonight is, how do we say no to negativity? If a being is totally consumed with his own well-being, service to self, and unable to open to service to all beings, we have to view that being as caught in negativity. How do we say no to negativity? What is the most appropriate, clearest way? Number one. And number two, how do we co-create with everybody that which is for the highest good? What supports that co-creation? Thank you. I am passionate about Vipassana meditation, mindfulness meditation. Being present and watching what arises in the mind and body with gentleness and kindness, not condemnation. Watching, seeing it arise, being present with it, seeing it pass away, until one begins to see the true self, the essence into which these stories arise and pass away. You said you can easily fall back to the old life patterns like separation, hatred, anxiety. So one begins to see the experience, the direct experience of anxiety as contraction in the body, for example, or in the mind. To note it. That which is aware of anxiety is not anxious. Without trying to get rid of the anxiety, I can rest in the spacious heart mind that's free of anxiety, and then hold a kind space for this human who is anxious until the anxiety dissolves. Whether it takes a minute or an hour or a week or a year. Watching it come up again and again, watching and getting to know the familiar stories. Not having to fix those stories, but committing oneself to co-create that which is, to co-create a presence with that which is free of the stories. right there with the stories. And thus to have compassion, but for all others who are caught up in the stories. Just stories. There's probably some fear, some anxiety. Fear that you will be attacked or humiliated. Fear of helplessness. I would suggest when you're in a group like that, for now, instead of trying to say anything, simply to work with mindfulness, aware of the contraction, aware of fear, and just quietly do compassion meditation for yourself, opening your heart to yourself and your discomfort. There's no need to try to talk. As you hold yourself in your heart, your energy field will change. You may find then that after this discussion, one or another of the group come up to you and say, I could feel your radiance there, your open-heartedness. What were you experiencing? And you may be able to speak from your heart to that one person, or not. Gradually, as the trust in the compassionate essence of your being grows, you'll find yourself increasingly able to talk where it's appropriate. And then mindfulness, breathing in, I am aware of contraction. Breathing out, I hold space for contraction. Breathing in, I'm aware of numbness. Breathing out, I give myself permission to feel numb. I hold space for the numbness. Watch the mind that says, I should be this way, I should be that way. Give yourself permission to be just as you are. Because just as you are in that moment, angry or afraid or numb, that's only one piece of you. And the rest of you, another big piece of you, is open-hearted and clear and loving and not afraid. But you can't get to that part of you unless you open to and have compassion for the part that is numb and afraid. The coming week in this country will be challenging. Undoubtedly, a lot of anger, a lot of fear. Hopefully, no physical harm to beings, but that may happen too. You have the power to co-create. You have the power to invite and co-create loving kindness, compassion, connection, to help people move out of their small ego selves and into the spaciousness of love. This does not need you to go down to the Capitol with a sign saying, I'll be loving, you be loving. That's not the loving. We're back to co-creating. All beings of light on this earth, those who are presently more of a negative persuasion and those who are more of a positive, service to self, service to all beings. All are beings of light. In your meditation, reach out and invite all beings of light, human and other, spirit, animal, all beings of light. Help me hold this experiment of light that we call Earth in all of our hearts. Help me hold the possibility that this earth can evolve into an increasing light realm, where each being respects, cherishes, and hears every other being. I choose to support the earth, which is at some level, ultimately, already a light realm. In its present manifestation, not yet there, but also already there. So, on one level, the relative level, it's linear, and on the ultimate level, it's immediate. We are all awake, we are all based in love. I invite the manifestation of this on earth, and I see it already happened. I know it in this moment as real. I invite it to fulfill what it already is, and that all beings, each as they are able, will join me. Let's see what many light groups around the world, and especially around this country, can do to help support us through what may be a challenging week. Will you do that with me? There's a beautiful song that we often sing at retreats. The words are, "All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you. All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you." And then words in Arabic. Ishkala mabud lela. Ishkala mabud lela. God is lover and beloved. And then it repeats. Good night.